Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. In this video I want to talk a little bit about why Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed to go to other churches. But before I do that, I want to address a question that Julian Watson had raised a while ago, and I had answered in the comments of the video that he raised the question in, but I wanted to address that a little bit more fully. He had asked me about letters of introduction, and I was not thinking about it the way that he was. I was just kind of thinking how they were used. But I recently had talked to him, and indeed his question was something different than what I thought it was. He was pretty much asking why they even exist. And the reason he was saying that is because in instances with things such as hospitals, it takes lots of permissions for you to allow your records to be transferred from place to place. So that's actually a really good question. Now, with hospitals and medical records, there are lots of laws that protect your personal information. With memberships of things such as Jehovah's Witnesses, I don't know if there are or not. I'm kind of guessing that they're not. But all that aside, the real reason why letters are sent is basically because of the type of group that Jehovah's Witnesses are. They are classified as a high control group because a lot of things they do are designed at controlling you. This is the same with letters of introduction. It's another level of controlling you. Even when you move out of a congregation. It's a way of making sure that the organization maintains some kind of control on you. And there's a number of side effects of these letters. For example, let's say that you are an appointed brother, meaning a ministerial servant or an elder, or even just a regular brother for that matter. If you get a letter that says bad things about you or negative things, that can affect your prospects for being appointed in the next congregation. Now, if you're already appointed, to be reappointed, you have to arrive with a letter that recommends your reappointment. If you don't, it's roughly equivalent to being removed. So if you don't get that letter of recommendation, what happens is your recommendation has to go back through the congregation that sent that letter. So there are times where that might be a good thing, like let's say somebody really was crazy. I know that's hard to imagine, a Jehovah's Witness acting crazy. But what would happen is that would follow them, and it would make it hard for them to get into a position of service again. But let's imagine that a Jehovah's Witness just had a disagreement with the body of elders that was in their congregation because that body of elders was crazy. If that particular person doesn't go along with it, well, they may get removed and they may have a hard time getting reappointed because that body of elders will not allow it. So that's one of the consequences of letters of recommendation. But that all is just kind of the whole scenario of letters of recommendation is just another example of the control that Jehovah's Witnesses, or rather the Watchtower, likes to exert over people. So those letters of introduction are kept on file with the congregation, oftentimes for years. So brothers can refer back to them. By brothers, I of course mean the elders, because they're the only ones that ever actually get to see those letters. In fact, to see any letters of recommendation, most oftentimes you have to be an elder. They probably will not share that information with you, despite the fact it's about you. And that's just indicative of the type of group they are. But I also wanted to talk about why the Watchtower will not allow Jehovah's Witnesses to go to other churches. And I recently figured out firsthand, or perhaps saw firsthand, the reason for this. And the primary reason is not because of these churches engaging in false worship, but it's because there are multiple churches out there where if you attend as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you will soon see that you are being lied to on a number of ways by the governing body about what actually happens in other religions. For example, some churches might be multicultural. There'll be people of all different races, and they get along just fine. They're happy to be there. And right away, this brings to mind the fact that the Watchtower says that only they are the ones that are able to provide unity between different races in a religious setting. So right away, you see that that is not true. Then you begin to find out that multiple churches have their own versions of missionary work, whether it's going out and ministering to people in their own area or going out of country to minister to people. There's multiple churches that engage in various different forms of ministry, which would be considered field service or missionary work by Jehovah's Witnesses or by the Watchtower. So there's a second thing that you're lied about. The third thing is they talk about individual sects as if they're different religions. But multiple other religions that consider themselves to be Christian consider themselves to be Christian first and their denominations second. They will oftentimes pray for the entire body of Christians regardless of their denomination. And they are concerned about the entire body of Christians regardless of their denomination. And this is something the Watchtower wants you to think doesn't exist. They want you to think that each little denomination is its own little thing. But a lot of different churches view those things as just secondary to being Christian. So that's another lie that the Watchtower is telling you that they don't want you to be able to verify for yourself. Another thing that you'll find is a lot of churches actually do a lot of charitable work. Instead of just going and giving people literature that teaches their own particular version of what the Bible says, they'll actually help people out, provide food, provide shelter. They'll go to war-torn areas to try to provide comfort. Things which Jehovah's Witnesses do not do. And when you see this happening, right away you are forced to think of Christ. And you're forced to think of his miracles. And the first thing he oftentimes did was he performed his miracles, including curing people, feeding the sick, and so forth, before he preached to them. Now, the Watchtower barely ever does anything along those lines to help people, unless, first of all, they're already members of the Watchtower organization, and second of all, they're in an area that suffered disaster. And my personal belief is that the reason for this is that let's say that you live in an area where there's a hurricane or something that destroys your home. Well, you can make an insurance claim and get money for that. So if the Watchtower goes and rebuilds your house, they kind of expect you to give them that insurance check. So they're building your house back with free labor, and they're getting the price not only of the materials, but also of the labor. So I'm under the impression that's a money-making venture for them. So I really don't consider that to be charity, except for the people who are donating their time and money and tools and skills, what have you. The actual witnesses themselves that go down are engaging in charity. But the organization on a whole, I don't believe, is engaging in charity. And on top of this, the only individuals they're concerned about in those situations are Jehovah's Witnesses and people who might be close enough to them that they can make a good impression on them, such as neighbors who might live next door and who see all the things happening. And if it doesn't take too long, then the witnesses will go over and help them. So this is typically the way it works. But this is kind of my opinion of why the Watchtower does not want witnesses to go to other churches. Because if they did, they can see that they are not being told the truth rather easily. So that's my video for this time. Short and sweet. Thanks for watching.